We have Brad Sturdy, Matt Stevens, Kedrick Prince. We're talking Illini football. We are going to talk defense. This is Mike Kegley. I on the Illini. You knew that. You guys are here for these guys and their expertise. Illinois' defense is the area, particularly defensive line, scares the snot out of me, particularly the inside part of the defensive line. I cannot figure out for the life of me, when you take a look at Brett Bielema's career, why more players are not wanting to come and play D line for him. He's done a pretty good job with that position over the years. They haven't had quite the success recruiting that they were hoping for. Brad, when you look at the DTs, how scary is this year's situation?
Well, I'm certainly glad they added Dennis Briggs. I certainly think, I like T. Rod Edwards. Alex Bray's gotten better. Obviously, JMO's done a great job developing nose tackles, go back down the line. But I would say that, so T. Rod Edwards, I think, Dennis Briggs, Alex Bray, I like those guys on the defensive line. Um, Again, I just don't see a ton of depth. I mean, I'm a big Pat Farrell fan, but I don't know if he's ready yet. He's young. Is it Holmes? Can Hunt? I don't know who's gonna play if one of those guys that is Jeremiah Warren. He's obviously got the talent, but I don't know. I just don't know which guy. General Hunt, and East Sledge, are those guys going to be guys who are there? And beat those guys out. But I don't know. I just think this is big question mark. When you are replacing guys like Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, you are replacing big shoes. So, but I if they're better in the backside in the secondary, maybe the defensive line is a little bit better. Yeah, it doesn't have to be quite as dominant, at a couple positions. So we'll see.
I'm with Sturdy. I think it could be the worst position group in the Big Ten. If you take everybody's position group, all 18, and you take everybody's 22 for the position groups, I think defensive line at Illinois could be the worst. And it's not because JMO can't develop them. Brad said it. Like, he just doesn't have clay to work with, And a couple of names I can give you is Ezekiel Holmes. I think he's going to have an impact. It's his 7th year in college. He ought to. And I think he's going to have an impact, whether that's beating Alex Bray out at the other end spot or not. I don't know, but he's had a really good camp. I think they like the fact that Gentle Hunt can maybe slide out to DN and play snaps, but I don't remember the last time a Big Ten team had a 5'11", 300-pound defensive end that was, and he had really good numbers in the SWAC for a national champion, for a Celebration Bowl champion at FAMU. I just think he would be more suited for the nose. The problem is, I think T.R.I. Edwards has had a really good camp, and I think he's gonna win the nose job in the middle. Alex Bray is a complete mystery because he just hasn't done it at this level consistently. He played like 9 or 10 snaps a game last year as a true freshman, and he's being asked to play Keith Randolph's position. It's a hell of a task. So, I mean, if this group can overachieve, I think Aaron Henry's defense can do wonders. But I have serious doubts about whether or not this specific group can overachieve. I think they have depth at the nose tackle spot if something happens to T-Raw, which, look, they're also replacing Denzel Jackson, who's in an NFL camp and probably going to make a practice squad in the NFL. Illinois always tends to find somebody in the portal that can play nose tackle. A couple years ago, it was T-Raw. This past year, it's Gentle Hunt and then Anish Sledge. So I think they can split the reps evenly at nose tackle, but on the left and right of that nose tackle, I have serious concerns. And Dennis Briggs hasn't been able to make it through a 12-game regular season healthy and God knows how long. This is also his 7th year of college football. If he gets hurt again, whew, like that group gets real rough real quick.
Well, Mike, you started this and you asked the question, If you're a defensive lineman, why you wouldn't want to play for Brett Bielema? Well, I can tell you right now, it's not that anymore. Maybe it's NIL money because I'm gonna tell you, you're right. There has to be a reason, and I'm gonna agree with Matt. It's just a thin group. I mean, there's a lot of new names out there that people are going to be expecting to play. Like you mentioned Briggs, but he's been around a while. But there's just not a lot of names out there. To be honest with you, I think what they're going to have to do, bottom line is, they're going to have to just develop talent. They're going to have to get guys and put them in position to play right away. Hopefully, they can develop and not get hurt because depth is an issue. And it's kind of sad to see, you know, and the Big Ten with NIL the way it is, that you can't go out and get linemen, especially like you mentioned, Mike, with the name like Brett Bielema, because he's a household name. So, you're not going to put any freshmen out there, true freshmen, because they're just not ready for it. I think Andrew McCullum is going to be a potential good player, but he's a freshman. Those kids aren't going to see the field. So, that's what's going to be the downfall of this team, I think, is the defensive line. And like, Brad mentioned, on the backside, I think they're better to hold their own, but I think the team's going to run the ball in Illinois a lot this year.
Yeah, we knew this was going to be a tough part of the broadcast, folks, because there's just no way to really be honest. And this is not against the kids. It's a struggle because the talent level isn't quite as high. At the same time, you need a 3-star to come through and be the next Johnny Newton. It's happened before, but boy, it's awful hard to try to make it happen twice in a row. So let's talk about outside linebacker Seth Coleman, Gabe Yakas. How important is it for these guys to live up to their headlines? Because if they put pressure on the quarterback, and we saw it last year when they were putting pressure on the quarterback, this was a different defense. I'm not saying it was the Illinois defense of 2 years ago, but can Yakas and Coleman, can they consistently bring the effort and get the results that could lift this team up, Brad?
Yeah, I think this group is a, if there's a defensive group that I have confidence in, this is the one. I really like this group. I think there's talent here. You mentioned Seth Coleman, Gabe Yakas, but I also like Alec Bryant, Daniel Brown, or Joe Barna. And then you've got some really talented young guys too, JoJo Hayden, Demetrius John, etc. So the Illini need those guys to be, just like you mentioned, Mike. They need those guys to be all Big Ten type guys, NFL type talents. Bielema thinks they are, and so now he's got to, they've got to do it, and they got to go out in the field and prove it.
Two things, Mike. One is the same thing I tell Lauren Taylor all the time, which is if you call Gabe Yakas a defensive end, he might enter the portal tomorrow. So he's an outside linebacker.
Yep.
He's an edge rusher. If you tell him he's a defensive lineman, I'm pretty sure he'll file the transfer portal paperwork like within 48 hours. But to answer your question, do you think that those guys can make up for maybe some deficiencies they have up front in the 3-man front if they're going to run a 5-man bear front? They better. Seth Coleman better be an all Big Ten player. Gabe Yakas better be an NFL draft pick. It's why they got brought to Indy for media day. They better be. I think this room took a little bit of a hiccup when Daniel Brown showed up with back problems. He's still wearing the device, the massage device on his lower back. That's a guy that led all junior college in sacks. I think they were counting on him for some stuff. Alec Bryant is pretty serviceable in the terms of being able to set the edge on the run in the run game. I don't know how much, pass rush he's been able to provide, but I think he's big enough to do that. And this staff's really, really excited about Joe Barna. And I still look, I'm gonna like let me see it first in a game from a true freshman, but they're really excited about him, and I think he could play a lot more than maybe even I think he's gonna. I just they're really, really excited about him. And so that's a recruiting win that you had over Wisconsin that Charlie Bullen got, and Clint Stunman is now working with him. I also think this group really likes their coach. For Seth Coleman, it's the 5th one that he's had in his career. So I think they've all been lumped together, but this is a guy who played edge rusher, outside linebacker at the college level and did it at an All-American level. And when Virginia's defense was really, really good under Bronco, they had really good edge rushers that could get the job done in the ACC. I think it's a really good hire by Brett Bielema. And I think if he develops both of these guys into NFL guys, I think Illinois could have something. But for Illinois to have any kind of pass rush, he better develop them into all Big Ten players, because otherwise Illinois is going to be searching high and low to try to figure out how to get in the backfield.
Well, Gabe's been around, and we know what he was like as a freshman. That's right. I mean, the talent is there. He really, in my opinion, has to step up this year. Not that I'm putting pressure on him, but I really am. Seth Coleman is another guy, and Matt's right. Losing Brown hurts. I mean, he was the JUCO kid from Hutchinson Community College. Yeah, that makes a difference. And I don't know how serious it is, man. I've not heard. I'm sure you probably have a better idea than I do of how bad his back really is. But we know that's tough, especially in football with the back injury as well as ankle. But you're right. I mean, that's the one position on defensive end, and I guess on the defense and on the backside of the ball that I feel the most comfortable with. But I really want to see Gabe be that guy that we saw as a freshman that just knocked, the socks off everybody, in the Big Ten and, all the accolades that he won. I mean, the talent's there. And now he has a chance to showcase him, himself and to be that guy. So, I mean, that's one part of it. And then, like you mentioned, Seth. So those are two guys that I think that can get it done. But then again, injuries, which we know can happen in football. I know you guys were talking about Cole Rusk earlier, but I tell you what, the depth is getting better, but it's just not there yet where they can lose somebody and not miss a beat.
So we go to the other linebacker in the inside linebacker position. Seems like a solid position. Brad, where should fans be looking at, and how should they feel about that?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, I think they've got a couple guys who can play, and I'm a big James Kreutz fan. I think he's going to be good. But Dylan Rosick, he had a really good finish to the year. Kenana Odeluga, he had again, these guys showed a little bit. They struggled early last year, got better as the season went on. And I think with Kreutz, they have depth, at that position. So I really think that that's a good position group of three guys. Now, again, they can't afford to have a bunch of injuries, but I like this group. I think this is a group that can be effective in the Big Ten. And, they're going to have to be, especially if the interior defensive linemen are not making tackles.
Yes.
To add on what Brad said, I think they also have a coach that's a future coordinator. I think Archie McDaniel is going to be a coordinator, potentially probably later on in life a head coach in the sport. Another really, really solid hire by Bielema, I thought. And yeah, just to add on, I think Dylan Rosiak is your starting middle linebacker. That's solid, right? KO gives you a little bit of an extra athletic ability there, but it's solid. James Kreutz has added weight to the point in which he can play the way he wants to, and it's not a complete suicide mission on his part. Like, you're talking about somebody who would throw his body around at 215, 220 pounds in practice. And it was a suicide mission. You knew he was going to get hurt. But he didn't care. He's Olin Kreutz's kid. He doesn't care, right? Now he's at 235, almost 240 pounds, and he's out of a green jersey, and he's still a monster. He's still doing that. So I think they have depth, and I think they're going to use the depth the way they can. I think you could see a lot of 4-2-5 being played. When they only want to have one outside linebacker rushing the passer, I think you could see that. I think you could see where they play four guys up front, and then the two middle linebackers are just kind of running sideline to sideline. I think you could see a lot of that. I think the key is that, like what Brad said, if Illinois has any chance to stop the run, and that's one of Bielema's keys, the middle linebacker is going to be key, because I think Dylan Rosiak's going to have to eat up, a spot on this defense. He's going to have to fill a hole. And I think he's going to have to do it a lot, and that remains to be seen. But he is on the Butkus Award watch list for a reason. I just think they're going to ask a lot out of that senior and that co-captain, and I don't know if he's been asked to do that at the college level at this point this much, but he's going to be asked to do it in 2024 for sure.
when you talk about this position, I think I've heard Dylan's name mentioned between Brad and Matt maybe 9 times. So that should tell you, how good of a player he is and what they need from him. And I don't want to date myself. I know Matt. I think he just turned 40, maybe. I don't know. But Illinois used to be known as linebacker youth. And I just it would be great to have those guys to be able to recruit those kids to come in to be that guy. And now we're just talking about one or two guys, that are difference makers. And like I said to you, it goes back to depth and and to how well they can continue to add people, whether it be the transfer portal, junior college kids. I just don't. My concern is, like I've said before, injuries. I'm not football's tough, and when you got guys that are, having bugs and one play, the first play, the season, you look at Matthew Bailey play one snap last and he was done for the year. So I know it's part of football, and it sounds like I'm crying over spilled milk, but they just have to get better from those positions. But I will say this. Breedlove has done a real good job with his coaching staff. When he goes out to get coaches, it's not just guys that are good he feels comfortable with. He gets guys that he thinks eventually can be head coaches at some point in time. So I trust the room. And you're right, but my concern is if they're going to have to stop the run, that goes back up front. That's going to be a concern.
So the other area that I've been feeling a little bit of optimism about is the DBs. Terrence Brooks comes over, look like there's some athleticism out there. Brad, am I wrong to feel like there's an opportunity here to coach them up and have a pretty good unit back there? Now, I'm not saying they can guard people in man-to-man for 7 seconds, but they have an opportunity to be better than maybe what we thought.
Yeah, Xavier Scott, Terrence Brooks. I think Tyler Strange and nickel is a good spot for him. I'll be honest with you. When they need coverage, and I really like Torrey Cox. I think Torrey Cox is a playmaker. I think he can do some things. Also like Jaheim Clark. I like him. And Chase Canada coming in is a guy who is, very, he has some, I guess you would say he's strong, big, strong kid. JUCO kid. He's strong, athletic. He's got to figure some things out, but he could be a backup. Now, I also, the other guy is Caleb Patterson. Patterson is really long, athletic. I think he's had a really good offseason. So this is a position group that I actually like much more. I like the secondary much more than I did a year ago. Now, part of that's because many of them were hurt last year, and so they weren't playing. That makes it hard when you're putting third string guys out there. But yeah, I think this group's more experienced. They've learned, and I think it's much better. But I think this is a good group.
Brad really likes this group for the same reason I think we both like the wide receiver group. Because it's amazing what happens when Terrence Brooks comes in on the transfer portal and everybody can get slotted the way they're supposed to, right? Again,
yep.
Bring in somebody that starts over 20 games at Texas, is an all Big 12 cornerback, decides I'm going to go to Illinois. His dad, Chet, decided we want him at Illinois we're going to cancel visits at Michigan and Southern Cal. That's just a big pickup, right? But the second key with this, and the second most, maybe the most important key with this room, is they got a new position coach. His name's Corey Parker, and he's doing things that I think are going to get this room less penalized than they were last year. Because the penalties in this room was just ridiculous. And it's one of the reasons Antonio Fanelis no longer has a job at the University of Illinois. And it's one of the reasons why this fan base still has a lot of consternation about Aaron Henry as a defensive coordinator. This team that unit specifically got penalized more often than anybody else in the Big Ten, it seemed like. Well, Corey Parker's decided during practice, we're going to put boxing gloves on. We're going to put oven mitts on. You are not going to grab. You are not going to hold. You're going to have to figure out how to cover people using your legs and your feet and your hips. And I think that's going to pay off a little bit this year because I think that these guys got lazy last year thinking that everything Devin Witherspoon did was just that easy, and it's not. Like, he made things look easy. And I think, Mike, look, I don't think they're going to be able to have to cover for 7 seconds, but check back with me on Halloween weekend when Dylan Gabriel was running around in Eugene, and I think they might have to. But I think this unit's going to be better. Brad mentioned somebody that I really, really like, which is Torrey Cox. Starts over 20 games in the MAC for a program that wins at Ohio, and nobody wanted him because he's 5'8.5". Well, his dad played in the NFL, and he was that height too. Um, he's really, really tough. He's beaten out Tyler Strain for that nickel spot, and that wasn't easy to do. But then that allows Tyler Strain to move down to maybe your fourth corner or fourth DB in that room, and she doesn't have to play 50 snaps at 5'8.5". So I just think that this room, once Terrence Brooks decided to come to Champaign, got slotted a lot better and looks a lot better. And yeah, if you're not going to get in the backfield as much because, Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph and Denzel Jackson aren't in Champaign anymore, you're going to have some guys in the back end. And at corner, at least, I think they feel like they're a little bit better. And especially when there's going to be 3 wide receivers on the field, I think they figured the 2 corners and the nickel that they're going to put out there are going to be pretty consistent. And I think they're just going to be better fundamentally because Corey Parker's making them do that in fall camp. And I think it could pay off.
I think the game changer, Chance Brooks, which we know about, but I want to talk a little bit about Matthew Bailey, not just because he's from my area. I know he's gotten bigger, and I remember when Brett Bielema recruited him, he was a 2-star recruit, didn't have a lot of offers. A lot of schools wanted him to walk on. But I remember Brett Bielema talking about this kid, in my eyes, because he's been around the NFL, has NFL potential. The key to him is if they can, keep him healthy. I think this is a strong part of Illinois' defense. I think there are guys that can make plays. I think they're physical. And you're right. I really want to see them. That's why a lot of those kids go to Illinois, because they like to play man coverage. And that's the one thing I want to see them do. But you're right, the penalties kill, but I think they're athletic enough. And that's the other thing. And they're not, and they're not all small. Terrence is 6 foot. Matthew Bailey is 6'2", so there's some size there, which I really, which I like as well. So, I mean, I think this is going to be a part of the defense that's going to, I know they like to have takeaways. I know that every, defensive, everybody likes to have takeaways. But this athleticism, I think overall from top to bottom, this could be a strong group. Which, if you can defend the pass, then obviously you force teams in the run. So, but again, I think just by getting Terrence Brooks, it gives the defense, at least the defensive back some credibility to know that, hey, there's some talent back there.
We've gotten through a defense that we're optimistic about once we get out of the interior defensive line. Let's take a few minutes here and talk a little bit about the special teams. We pretty much know who the punter is. We pretty much know who the kicker is. What do we expect real quick out of kicking and punting? Brad?
I think that's another strength for this team. I think the kicking and punting is a strength. I think David Alano is good. I think you've got Fabrizio Pinzone was Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week once. So and then so you've got Alano is the guy. He's handled kickoff duty. He's got a strong leg. I think he's going to be good. I think at punter, obviously Hugh Robertson is the punter. He was struggling a little bit in 2022, but he really good season last year. So I like them at punter. Kick returner, I think you're going to see a few different guys out there. Kanari Wilcher has, kind of that can break things. Adrian Lawfrey, again, I think he'll get better. So that allows you maybe not to use a Pat Bryant back there or Josh McCray, who you don't want them to get hurt. Punt returner, I think, is Hank Beatty. I think, one thing about Beatty, I think he's similar to Isaiah Williams. Not saying he's going to be as explosive, but he's very sure-handed. And so you're not going to have maybe the one thing that always kind of hurt Isaiah Williams was that he could make some plays, but he also would make some plays that turned into negative plays with fumbles, muff some things. And we've already seen that a little bit. So I think Beatty will be a little bit more sure-handed. So, yeah, I think these are good position groups that can make them, make us stand up for special teams, right? Isn't that what they said in the Lou Tepper era?
I think Brad's right. I think his boy Hank Beatty did one thing. He convinced his head coach that he was a punt returner coming out of high school, that he'd never done it before. So he faked out his head coach enough to think that he is really good at it. One thing with the kicking game, Ethan Machowski, sorry. Mm-hmm. if you need a really long field goal, he might be your guy. Like, okay, in the I think it's the Under Armour game or whatever All-Star high school All-Star game they play on NBC. Illinois has the two kickers in that game. Like, Ethan was the other kicker along with David Alana. He transferred from Texas A&M. I do think they're going to split it with David. One's going to be the primary field goal kicker. One's going to be the primary kickoff guy. Again, your tight ends coach at Illinois, Robbie Disher, has not hinted who has won what. I tend to think the scholarship guy is going to be your field goal guy. I've not seen David miss all that much in fall camp. It's the one thing in practice after stretching we get to watch. And he's been really, really good. Ethan's been really, really good on long kicks. His accuracy and trying to figure out the swirling wind of Memorial Stadium has not worked out well yet in fall camp. Didn't suspect that it would, but he has a huge leg, and there's a reason why he was a really star kicking prospect that signed with Texas A&M. Hugh Robertson's the punter. I know people still have PTSD from 2020 when he kicked it in the rear of the up back guy. Look, I mean, Hugh's 31 years old. He'll tell you, hey, it's on me, man. Like, and when he's not lying on his bio at fightingillini.com about all the stuff that he did in Australia, like he does a really, really good job. And I thought he'd had a really, really good bounce back year in 2023. They rely on him a lot. And then I do think Robbie Disher could get really creative on what they want to do with kickoff. And I think that he's on the flip side going to be unbelievably uncreative of what they do with punt return. I think Hank's going to stand out there in the middle of the field. He's going to wave to his mom and dad and his high school coach like it's a fair catch, and then he's going to catch the ball, and then he's going to run over to the sideline. I think we're back to the Lovie Smith days of catch the ball and we'll put the offense on the field. But on kick return, I do think when you have Kenari Wiltshire back there and you've got potential of like Tyler Strain back there and you've got some speed, maybe Illinois will take a kick back to the house for the first time since 2012. Or have really, really good field position because we know how much Bielema values that. So I think Illinois could get, and oh, by the way, and this is what happens when you get to watch an open practice. There's a big 250-pound guy who's the up back guy named Caden Fagan who's on kickoff too. So if you want to kick it short, it's probably to your own detriment. So I think special teams wise, I think Illinois could be pretty solid, and I like the coach that they have because he's done it really, really well for at a lot of different places.
Well, right away, I remember when David Alana was recruited, and I wrote a couple of stories about him because most coaches or schools don't give out scholarships. That tells you how good he is because they just don't. A lot of special team guys don't get those. The one thing I want to see Brad mentioned earlier, and this is not a knock against Isaiah Williams. I think back to the Iowa game a few years ago where they won. They were really lucky to win. I just think that part of the game that it's huge and it's underrated. Matt just disappointed me and broke my heart when he mentioned this catch the ball and this. I don't want to see that. I think field position is huge. I think the teams that are aggressive can do that. You give your offense a chance. Whether it be Hank Beatty, which Bielema loved. We know when they recruited him how good he was, and you can get Kenari and another opportunity to have the ball in his hands. They have athletes. I just don't want to see them just settle for that. And the turnovers, those hurt and they kill. When you turn the ball over, and on special teams, those hurt. And I know a few years ago, Bielema broke down to us about how games are lost in the first, second, and third quarter. I mean, it does. It really matters. In a close game, you can't have those kind of mistakes. So having hands back there, again, nothing against Isaiah Williams, but I really hope they clean that part of the game up, And when you get an opportunity to kick field goals, you put them in there because it all matters.
I think what we're hearing is that the special teams are much more optimistic, and it, again, sounds like a good thing. So we will come back with a discussion on the schedule. It's schedule time, folks. This is the time that you bookmark your Twitter so that you can call this back up, or you save this episode so you can get receipts later on for our picks. And before we start, I just want people to realize that it was either 23 of the last 26 national title winners in football, or 25 out of the last 28. Can't remember. But they had four things in common. They had a head coach, an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and a quarterback who had been together for at least 2 years. So I'm going to be right here to say if you use that formula, Illinois is in the mix for a national title this year. So this schedule, Brad, as I look at it, I guess there's that back-to-back week of Michigan, which game on October 19th is going to be the coolest game of the year with the throwback jerseys, the helmets. It's 100 years in one day off of Red Grange's dedication game slaughter of Michigan. And then you got to turn around and play Oregon the next week. That is a scary one for me. And I think the biggest unknown, I know they're only ranked 22, but having Kansas come to town with that offense is scary on September 7th. But what are your general impressions of the schedule this year for the Illini football team?
I'll be honest with you. I look at those 3 games, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, and just say, don't get hurt. And that's your goal. I'm not trying to be mean here, but that's just what you're looking for. Don't get hurt there. And then, so you got the other 9 games, win 6 of those. Everything's peachy. And I do think Kansas is one of those games that's going to tell us a lot. And I'm not even saying that they have to beat Kansas in that game, but they've got to compete. And
which they didn't last year, right?
Oh, no, it was ugly. I mean, I know the final score didn't look as bad as the game was, if that makes sense. But, it's conceivable. If you start 3-0 going into Nebraska, or you're 4-0 after Nebraska going into Penn State, you feel pretty good. I mean, this is conceivable. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but this team could start 5-1. It really could. And then you feel really good about the finish, as long as nobody gets killed against Michigan and Oregon. And then, because the last 4 games, guess about them? They're all winnable too. So they have 9 games that I look at and say, you can win those 9 games. Now, obviously the problem is, that means there are 9 games they could lose, or maybe 7. We'll say they beat AIU, Central Michigan, although I think those teams are probably better than we're giving them credit. But so let's say you got 7. So if you go 4-3, you're 6-6. You go 5-2, you're 7-5. I mean, that's where we're at. And if by some miracle you can use the barge and beat Penn State again, and somehow they do call offensive pass interference and you beat Michigan, everything goes your way. I don't know. Oregon somehow, the team comes down with like typhoid or something like that. Maybe you can
monkeypox,
and their helmets won't fit on their heads. I don't know, something crazy, but I mean, yeah, this is that's your best case. That's where I'm looking at this season,
gentlemen. The most important game that Brett Bielema will have ever coached at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign will be on September 7th when they kick it off at 6 p.m. against Kansas. The most important game that Illinois will ever play under Brett Bielema at that time. Why? There are 2 people that Josh Whitman personally interviewed for the Illinois head coaching job. One will be on the home sideline. The other will be on the visiting sideline. And the guy on the visiting sideline is already 1-0 on the guy on the home sideline. And yeah, Brett Cagley, you and I were both there in Lawrence. It was not close.
No, it was not.
It was blowout. Let Lance Leipold go 2-0 with 2 blowouts against Brett Bielema's Illini. I really feel like there's a way for me to write the obituary of the University of Illinois 2024 season at about 10 o'clock on September 7th. If this thing goes badly, it'll be because they got their doors blown off on September 7th. And because October is hell. But everybody is pointing to these last 4 games. You've got to get to the last 4 games. And the only way to get to the last 4 games is to have some sort of momentum going into those last 4 games. If there's a way for this team to quit, if there's a way for this team to not see any light at the end of the tunnel, you could start to see it on September 7th. I think that you have to be. I'm with Brad that that's a really important game. I think you have to win it. I really do, and I don't think Illinois is going to be favored. And I think they could almost be a double-digit underdog at home in that game. I think they got to win it, and the reason I feel like they've got to win it is you've got to start building the momentum for the game that Cagney talked about, the 100-year game against Michigan. Illinois has only had since 2016. Illinois has only had 50,000 people in the stands twice. Okay, the first FBS game when they played North Carolina of the Lovie Smith era, and the Michigan State game in 2022. It's the only times. If you want that game to be a sellout and you want 50,000 people in Memorial Stadium for the defending national champs in the Red Grange game, you better beat Kansas. You better show that you're competitive at Nebraska. You better show that you're competitive at Penn State, because otherwise people won't show up. And if all those things happen, I've seen this happen before, where you continue the snowball keeps rolling downhill in a bad way, and then you get to those last 4 games, and like, what happens if you're like 2-6 and you need to win all 4 of them? Like, Rutgers in Piscataway is not a picnic, fellas. Like, I mean, especially when we don't know what injuries are going to be like. But I'm just telling you, if Kansas comes in here and boat races Illinois on September 7th, like, Katie bar the door, because I think this thing could go really, really bad. On the flip side, if Illinois wins that game and suddenly they're 2-0, and now we're staring at a Central Michigan game where, like, non-conference game where, okay, that's their 3rd win. But if they beat Kansas at home, there's no reason why they can't go to Nebraska and be competitive and pull that off. Like, so now you've got light, you've got hope. But if Kansas does exactly what they did in Lawrence last year, there's no hope. Like, I just don't think a lot of this fan base is going to see a lot of hope. And I think they need to see something. And if they don't see it, they don't see it early, boy, it's just going to be hell. And I just, that's why I feel like that is the most important game that Brett Bielema has ever coached in Champaign-Urbana, period.
Well, I'm going to kind of go in the middle. I think they're going to win. I do. I think they're going to win because of, one, I think they were embarrassed last year. I think their offense is a heck of a lot better than what it was last year. That's just my personal opinion. And you're right. They can't afford to lose, and they can't afford to lay an egg. You know, if you want to show that you're going to turn the program around, you have to go out and you have to beat Kansas. Because if you're right, Brett, Matt, if you beat Kansas, the Nebraska game is winnable. You know, they've had Nebraska's number. I know it's a new coach there. But and then when you play Eastern Illinois, you can't. I know you're not going to show the full arsenal. You're just not going to. But you want to make it a statement game. You don't want to go out there like Toledo last year, and there's no Casey Washington where there's going to be that magical catch, and then you go on to win the game. But to me, looking at the schedule objectively, they have to beat somebody, in my opinion, that they're not supposed to beat. That's in a nutshell. Whether it be Michigan, Penn State, or Oregon, I don't know. But they have to go out and beat someone, especially if they do lose to Kansas, which I don't think they're going to. But that's a momentum changer. I think the program needs to go in the right direction. And I think Brett Bielema said it during the Big Ten press conference, you know, at Media Day. You got to win games, man. And he knows that, and he's fully aware of that. So losing these games that you're not supposed to, you know, I don't want to disrespect anybody, but you got to beat Minnesota. You got to beat Michigan State. You know, you can't lose to the Northwestern, because traditionally, if you look at Illinois, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you're waiting for Illinois to win 1 or 2 games to salvage a season, to win, to go to a bowl game, it probably won't happen. So don't put yourself in that situation to begin with. But you want people to also start talking about Illinois football. That's why the Michigan game is going to be huge. And Brad cracked a joke about not being hurt against those teams, but he's right. I mean, and to go out to Oregon and to put up a good showing and to not be blown out like 41-3 or something like that, that can't happen. I mean, good teams that don't happen. Yes, you're going to lose some games. And Brett Bielema, the one thing I do like about him as a coach, he has not been blown out very, very many times. Part of that is because he controls the ball. He doesn't let teams, he don't throw the ball 80 times, which I wish he would throw 79 times. but you know, but for the most part, they're going to run the ball because of the line this year. And then I really have a lot of confidence that they're going to put some points up big teams that they're supposed to beat this year.
So now it comes the time where we do our predictions. And as I look at this schedule, I think a team could win as many as 8 games. Unfortunately, I see this as a 6-6 season, and I see losses to Kansas. I see loss to Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon, and Rutgers, which pulls you in at 6-6. And this is the scary part, would require you to win over Northwestern, who seems like they're going to overperform in Wrigley Field the Saturday after Thanksgiving, which Illinois, when there's things on the line, that has not been a great weekend for them. So, Brad, I'm saying 6-6. I know that's a little bit on the pessimistic side. I think they could be better, but inopportune injuries, a lack of a monkeypox game at Oregon, and that's why I have them at 6-6.
Well, I'm going to be optimistic because I'm just feeling optimistic today. I'm going 7-5.
Okay. And you usually win. You usually win our pick stuff. I'll give you credit there. So Brett Bielema should have a smile on his face.
There's one team I never bet on. You know what that team is? It's Illinois, because too much heart gets involved and not enough head, right? But I will say this. You guys talk about the most important game being Kansas, and Matt was talking because can't lose to Lance Leipold. What if they lost to Purdue this year?
Again?
Yes. I mean, Ryan Walters, seriously, that might be worse. But no, I think 7-5 is my answer. And I think they're beating Purdue this year because Purdue is god awful.
It would be worse to lose to Purdue. Sorry.
Hey, Ked, go ahead.
Okay. I see 7 wins. I just do. I was going to be stupid and be the homer, but I'm not going to. I'm just not. I can't do it because I know people are going to say,
you know what's funny, Ken, is it's stupid too. Like, we all know, like, we're homers.
National title. Is that what you said, Ked?
No,
let's just win.
Darn it. You know what? You should have gone on the schedule. And I'm thinking in my heart, they're going to beat Oregon. You guys just watch. But
on a Halloween weekend, not a chance. Illinois might be
that would be as big of an upset as when Red Grange ran all over Michigan 100 years ago.
Just remember Juice at Ohio State.
I hear he's coming back. I hear he's coming out of retirement.
They're going to need him.
They're going to lose to somebody. Right? What's that?
I was asking Sturdy if they were going to pull Red Grange out of the grave.
Pulling him out of the grave. I mean, hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
If you take away the Kansas game and the Purdue game, I think a loss that will just probably, I only have like 6 hairs left, is to lose to Michigan State. I don't want to see that. That's one of those losses where you leave Memorial Stadium and you think, damn, I got a 3-hour ride home, talking to myself thinking, how do they lose to Michigan State? That's typically what happens to Illinois, and that's what they can't do this year, in my opinion. Gosh, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, and football guys, I love you. Don't take it personal. If you want to be the Brad Underwood at Illinois, you have to win some games. Matt's right. You got to put people in the stands. I mean, because when I talk to the recruits, they have all the pitches, they have the facilities. Get the kids, and winning matters. Underwood struggled first few years. Now, he's one of the top programs in the country. You got to win, and the rest will take care of itself. But to answer your question, I'm going with 7 W's.
Okay. First of all, let me point out that Sturdy and Ked have me like in either Nashville or Las Vegas for bowl month, and I'm cool with that. Like, I'm totally cool with that. For this exercise, first of all, let me answer Sturdy's question that if Ryan Walters comes into Champaign and makes it 2 in a row on Illinois, he might go all the way out to midfield and moon the entire home fan base at Illinois. Like, that may actually happen.
I don't think that would be good.
That'd
be good.
Yeah. I mean, there's no the company doesn't exist anymore, but it would be a Kodak moment. Like,
I'm not certain if I call it a Kodak moment, but yeah.
Yeah. For this exercise, Mike Cadley gets to play the football god. Okay, so because when I ask the football gods these types of questions, like how many wins is Illinois going to have this year? The one question is, did they beat Kansas on September 7th? So, football god Mike Cadley, did Illinois beat Kansas on September 7th?
I'm having a hard time thinking they're going to do that.
Then I think they could win 3 or 4.
Oof.
I think they could go 3-9 or 4-8. I don't see this going well if Kansas comes in and wins that game. Now, on the flip side, if Mike Cadley and the football gods are wrong, and Illinois does win that game, I can see a path to 6-6. I can. I don't think they're going to beat the defending national champions on Red Grange Day. I don't think they're going to win in Happy Valley. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon on Halloween weekend.
Brett, he does get that upset win often. The problem is he gives it back.
He didn't last year though.
Right.
And look, here's the deal. Like there's a chance, I've looked at the schedule, there's a chance Minnesota's 6-2 when they roll into Champaign and could be ranked. This staff has not beaten Ryan Walters' staff yet. And they've only had one other opportunity, but it was bad. So I mean, there's toss-up games. A lot of them are at home. The Rutgers game at the end of the year is no picnic. Playing with Piscataway is not a picnic. Shiano's got a really. I don't like their quarterback. I have never liked him.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think the rest of the roster is pretty talented, and they're tough as hell, like their head coach. I don't think Illinois will be favored in that game in Piscataway. So I have a tough time getting to 6 if they don't beat Kansas. Because I don't think you go to Lincoln and you beat Matt Rule's Nebraska team in year 2. I actually think Nebraska could go 8 or 9, 8 wins, 8-4 or 9-3. I'm just having a hard time with it if they don't beat Kansas, because I think you can build momentum off the Kansas win, and suddenly now everybody's playing at a higher level. On the flip side, if you lose the game against Kansas, I think everybody plays at a lower level. So Illinois is probably not going to be favored. In fact, they could be a double-digit underdog at home to Kansas. This could be the Jaden Daniels highlight game, or Heisman highlight game, that gets his Heisman momentum started, especially if Illinois' defense is as bad as it was last year. So if they lose the Kansas game, fellas, it could be a real rocky season. I think 3-9 and 4-8 is on the table at that point. If they beat Kansas, I think there's a really decent shot that Illinois is going into a bowl game. That's the way I'll put it. I think that everything rides on September 7th, on the night of September 7th.
Well, that's a no pressure situation for our guys as they open up against that Kansas team.
Piece of cake.
We have a 6-6, 2 7-5s, and a variance of 3 wins to 7 wins. That's pretty much Illinois in a nutshell. Now, I will say, if you look at the matchup predictors on ESPN, right now Kansas is hovering just slightly under 70%. To me, interesting game is at Nebraska. What does Dylan Raiola look like right now? The Nebraska media has him as some sort of younger clone of Patrick Mahomes. And while I think he's a great athlete, I don't think it's fair to put that much pressure on a freshman. But
you don't think so?
Maybe he'll be fine. You know what I mean? Maybe he'll live up to it.
Let's not forget, though, Mike Cagley, that's a week after Nebraska gets to dump truck all over Dion in Lincoln.
So let's hope that they're all
not going to be riding the momentum wave at that point. Ooh, boy, howdy! And it's a Friday night, so Illinois gets like 1 day less of preparation for whatever the hell Matt Rule can throw at him.
Maybe Luke Altmaier will be the modern day Joe Burrow for Illinois. Any final thoughts, gentlemen? Ked, you've been quiet. Any final thoughts as we wrap this puppy up?
I'm just excited college athletics is here. I mean, no disrespect to summer sports. I'm a big college guy, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. You know, I really listen to what Matt had to say, and I'm going to tell you, if they do what Matt said and they win 3 or 4 games, oh, hell. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know what's going to happen long term. They can't do that. I think this is a really, really big year for University of Illinois football program. I just do on so many levels. So that's my 2 cents.
Brad?
Yeah, I think it's huge. This is the season. This is make or break for Brett Bielema. I think he has to make a bowl game. Makes a bowl game, momentum continues, and you start feeling pretty good. Don't make a bowl game, not good.
Yeah, it's hard to convince people like, hey, you gave us a little bit of money last year. We need a lot in this year. And
yeah, and if they end up like Matt did, you gave us some money. We went 3-9. We could have gone 3-9 without money.
Matt, you get to be the happy guy who wraps it all up for us.
I don't know if Illinois can go 3-9 without money. I'm just going to be real with you. Look, I wish this roster was had more talent. I wish this roster had the opportunity to be more competitive in the transfer portal. I wish this roster had more in-state kids over the last 2 years that decided to come to the University of Illinois. It doesn't. You're going to need your experienced guys to be really, really solid this year. I think you're going to have every one of them play above their normal capabilities in order for Illinois to have a special season. So I think if you think that Brett Bielema can do that, can pull that off, give him all the monies for 2025 and 2026. If you don't, look, the buyout number is way too high, so I don't even want to go there. So I think you could see a lot of malaise over the next few years as we wait for the buyout. It becomes a joyous exhibition of waiting for the buyout to get lowered. I don't think Brett Bielema wants that program to be going in a direction like that, but you've seen it all across the country. Don't let Illinois be that. And if Illinois gets to 6 or 7 wins, they're not that. But if Illinois wins 3 games, wins 4 games, I think you're there. You're in that, you're in that biohazard zone, and you're just kind of waiting for the malaise. So yeah, I do think it's a huge momentum year for Brett Bielema, but I think I just don't like the way this roster sets up from a talent perspective in an 18-team Big Ten that's really, really competitive.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this on the podcast and on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular and on Big Sports Radio, both shows you can get on podcast. But we've talked a lot about the fact that this year is probably the year that when you reflect back on Brett Bielema will be the year that people go, yep, this is the year that he really locked it down and Illinois started elevating, or it will be that was the year that we knew that things weren't going to work. And fair, unfair isn't part of it. As Clint Eastwood said in Unforgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it. So we will see how this team manages. They've got an opportunity on offense to be something special. And who knows, maybe we'll see a year where the offense puts points on the board and they keep the other team off the field enough that the defense can make it through. But folks, that's why they play the games. We will, of course, be here. We will have our Eye on the Illini where we bring in somebody from another team's media. That'll be out usually on Monday mornings. And then, of course, we will have our Thursday show where we talk about what's going on. And, of course, we will have our post-game show right after the game to either cry or be exultant or somewhere in between, depending on our relative level of numbness. So with that, folks, we are looking forward to a heck of a season. And no matter what happens, we'll be here covering it. Until next time, go Illini.